Once upon a time, in a world lit by gas lamps and powered by steam, a child was born who would change the way we see everything. He would not be a king or a conqueror, but a quiet man with messy hair and kind eyes. His name was Albert Einstein, and his story begins not with a bang, but with a whisper of wonder. He was born in Ulm, Germany, in 1879. As a very young child, Albert was quiet. So quiet, in fact, that his parents worried. He didn't speak his first words until he was nearly 3 years old. He wasn't slow. His mind was simply busy with other things. It was a mind that preferred to watch and wonder, to absorb the world in silence before trying to describe it. When he finally did speak, he would often practice the whole sentence softly to himself before saying it out loud, as if making sure the words were just right. The first great mystery of his life arrived in a small, simple package. When Albert was 5 years old and sick in bed, his father gave him a magnetic compass. It was a simple toy, but for the boy, it was magic. He turned it this way and that, but the needle always, stubbornly, pointed north. There were no strings, no hidden hands, nothing he could see. Yet, an invisible force was clearly at work, a secret law of the universe acting on this little metal needle. Why? The question lodged itself deep in his mind. He felt, as he later said, a wonder. This was the true beginning of his journey. He saw a world full of unseen rules, and he wanted to understand them. This curiosity would guide his entire life. School, however, was not a place of wonder for young Albert. The German schools of his time were strict and rigid. They valued memorization and discipline above all else. Students were expected to sit straight, repeat facts, and follow orders without question. For a boy who lived on questions, this was a kind of prison for the mind. He was a good student, especially in math and science, but he hated the method. He compared the teachers to army sergeants. He wasn't a bad student. He was a bored one. His mind wanted to fly, but the school wanted to keep it in a cage. This experience taught him a powerful lesson. True learning comes from freedom and curiosity, not from force. Fortunately, his education at home was much richer. His mother, Pauline, was a talented pianist, and she filled their home with the beautiful, logical patterns of music. Albert learned to play the violin, and it became a lifelong friend. He found that the music of Mozart and the laws of physics had something in common, a deep, underlying harmony. When he was stuck on a difficult problem, he would often play his violin, letting his mind wander through the music until a new idea appeared. His uncle Jacob was another important teacher. He introduced Albert to the joys of algebra, calling it a merry science, where you hunt for a little animal, the unknown, X, and name it. He showed Albert that mathematics wasn't just about numbers. It was a powerful language for describing the world's secrets. When Albert was a teenager, his family's business failed, and they moved to Milan, Italy. For Albert, leaving the strict German school was like a great escape. Italy was a breath of fresh air. The people were warmer, the culture was more relaxed, and he felt a sense of freedom he had never known. He spent his days exploring museums, marveling at art, and, most of all, thinking. It was during this time that he made a significant personal choice. At just 16 years old, he decided to renounce his German citizenship. He did not want to be part of a country that forced its young men into military service. He declared himself a citizen of the world, a decision that showed his early commitment to pacifism, the belief that war and violence are always wrong. His goal was to study at the prestigious Zurich Polytechnic in Switzerland. He took the entrance exam, but failed. It's a comforting thought for anyone who has ever failed a test. Even Albert Einstein didn't pass on his first try. He excelled in the math and physics sections, but his knowledge of French, chemistry, and biology was not good enough. So, he spent a year at a special high school in Aarau, Switzerland. This school was completely different from his German one. Here, teachers encouraged students to think for themselves, to conduct experiments, and to nurture their own ideas. Albert thrived. It was here he first asked himself a question that would lead to his greatest discovery. What would I see if I could ride on a beam of light? Think about it. Light travels incredibly fast. If you were traveling alongside it, at the same speed, would the light wave look frozen to you, like a static, unmoving wave in space? The laws of physics at the time said this should be impossible. This puzzle, a Gedanken experiment or thought experiment, was typical of Einstein. He didn't need a laboratory. His mind was his laboratory. He would play with ideas, twist them, and follow them to their logical, often strange, conclusions. The next year, he passed the exam and entered the Zurich Polytechnic. He was a confident, sometimes arrogant, young man. He often skipped classes he found boring, preferring to study the masterworks of physics on his own time. He borrowed lecture notes from his diligent friend, Marcel Grossman. But he wasn't just studying. He fell in love. Her name was Miliva Maric, a fellow physics student from Serbia. She was the only woman in their class, a quiet, brilliant, and serious person who shared his passion for science. They would spend hours together, talking about physics, music, and life. She was his intellectual equal, his partner in thought. Their relationship was a source of great joy and collaboration, but it was also marked by sadness. They had a daughter, Liesel, before they were married, but what happened to her is a mystery. She likely died in infancy or was given up for adoption. The weight of this secret stayed with them. After graduating in 1900, Einstein faced another harsh reality. He couldn't find a job. The very professors he had ignored now refused to write recommendations for him. The brilliant mind that would redefine the cosmos was unemployed and struggling. He took temporary teaching jobs to make ends meet, feeling like a failure. It was a difficult and humbling period. This struggle is an important part of his story. It shows that even genius needs a little luck and help. That help finally came from his friend Marcel Grossman's father, who secured him a position at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern. The patent office job was, in a strange way, the best thing that could have happened to him. It was not demanding intellectual work. He would examine inventions and applications, checking if they were practical. The work was simple enough that he could finish it in a few hours. The rest of the day, his mind was free, sitting at his quiet desk, surrounded by the blueprints of other people's ideas. He was free to work on his own. This humble government job gave him a steady income, a peaceful life with Miliva, whom he married in 1903, and, most importantly, time. Time to think. He called his desk drawer the Bureau of Theoretical Physics, because it was where he kept his secret calculations and revolutionary ideas. In Bern, he also formed a small discussion group with two friends, Maurice Solovine and Conrad Habicht. They cheekily called themselves the Olympia Academy. They would meet to eat, talk, and passionately debate science and philosophy late into the night. It was a life raft of intellectual stimulation in what could have been a lonely existence. Then came 1905. Historians of science call it the Annus Mirabilis, the miracle year. From his unassuming desk at the patent office, the 26-year-old clerk published 4 papers in a single scientific journal. Any one of these papers would have made a scientist's career. Together, they shook the foundations of physics and set the stage for a new century of science. The first paper explained something called the photoelectric effect. Scientists had noticed that when you shine light on a piece of metal, it can knock electrons loose. But, weirdly, the color of the light, its frequency, mattered more than its brightness, its intensity. Einstein's bold idea was that light isn't just a continuous wave, as everyone thought. He proposed that light also behaves like a stream of tiny energy packets, which we now call photons. Imagine rain. You can have a light drizzle or a heavy downpour, but either way, the rain is made of individual drops. Einstein was saying light is like that. A brighter light means more light drops, photons, but the energy of each drop depends on its color. This idea was so revolutionary that many physicists rejected it for years. It was the first step into the strange new world of quantum mechanics, and it was for this work, not relativity, that he would eventually win the Nobel Prize. The second paper was about something called Brownian motion. If you look at tiny specks of dust or pollen floating in a drop of water under a microscope, you'll see them jiggling and dancing around for no apparent reason. Einstein explained that this dance was caused by the water molecules, which were too small to see, constantly bumping into the specks of dust. Imagine a giant beach ball being pushed around by an invisible crowd of people. You can't see the people, but you see their collective effect on the ball. Through his calculations, Einstein was able to prove, mathematically, that atoms and molecules were real. At the time, many scientists still considered them just a convenient theory. Einstein's paper provided the first solid proof of their existence. The third paper was the one that began to make him famous. It was called On the Electrodynamics of Moving Bodies, and it introduced the world to the special theory of relativity. This theory was born from that question he asked himself as a teenager. What if you could ride a beam of light? He realized that the laws of physics, especially the speed of light, must be the same for everyone, no matter how they are moving. This simple-sounding idea has mind-bending consequences. Let's use an analogy. Imagine you're on a very fast, smooth train. You throw a ball up in the air. To you, it goes straight up and straight down. But to someone standing on the ground outside, the ball is not just moving up and down. It's also moving forward at the speed of the train. So, your motion changes how the outside observer sees the ball's path. Now, what about light? If you turn on a flashlight on that train, Einstein said the beam of light moves away from you at the speed of light. But for the person on the ground, the light does not move at the speed of light plus the speed of the train. It just moves at the speed of light. The speed of light is the universe's ultimate speed limit, and it's constant for everyone. If the speed of light is always the same, then something else must change to make the math work. What changes, Einstein said, are space and time themselves. For an object moving very, very fast, time actually slows down. This is called time dilation, and its length in the direction of motion gets shorter, called length contraction. This isn't a trick of perception. It's a real physical effect. If one of two twins flew on a spaceship near the speed of light and returned to Earth, she would be younger than the twin who stayed behind. Time itself would have passed differently for them. Space and time were no longer a fixed, absolute background for the universe. They were flexible, relative, and dependent on your motion. A few months later, As a short follow-up to this paper came the fourth bombshell. It was a tiny, 3-page paper that contained the most famous equation in all of science. E equals mc superscript 2. This equation is like a secret recipe for the universe. It says that energy, E, and mass, m, are two sides of the same coin. Mass is simply a very, very concentrated form of energy. The c in the equation is the speed of light, which is a huge number, and it's squared, c superscript 2, which makes it an astronomically huge number. What this means is that a tiny amount of mass can be converted into a tremendous amount of energy. Think of a small piece of wood. It contains a certain amount of potential energy, which you can release by burning it as fire. Einstein's equation showed that the very substance of the wood, its mass, is a form of locked-up energy, and the amount is staggering. This little equation explained how stars shine, and, tragically, it would later unlock the secret to the atomic bomb. After the miracle year, the world of physics began to take notice. The patent clerk was not just a clever amateur. He was a genius. Slowly, academic doors began to open. He was offered a professorship at the University of Zurich, then in Prague, and then back in Zurich. He was finally a respected professor, but his mind was already grappling with a new, even bigger problem. His special theory of relativity was fantastic, but it was special because it only dealt with constant, steady motion. It didn't include acceleration or, more importantly, gravity. What was gravity? Newton had described it as a mysterious force, a pull that acted instantly across vast distances of space. Einstein was bothered by this. How could the sun pull on the Earth instantly? Nothing, not even gravity, could travel faster than light. That old compass from his childhood still echoed in his mind. There had to be an explanation for this invisible force. For the next 10 years, Einstein embarked on what he called the hardest struggle of my life. This was not a sudden flash of insight like in 1905. It was a slow, grueling intellectual battle, filled with frustrating dead ends and mathematical complexities so great he needed help from his old friend, the mathematician Marcel Grossman. The key breakthrough came with another brilliant thought experiment. He called it the happiest thought of my life. Imagine a man in an elevator with no windows. If the elevator is stationary on Earth, he feels his weight pulling him down. Now imagine the elevator is in deep space, far from any planet, and a cable is pulling it upwards, accelerating it. The man inside would feel pressed against the floor in the exact same way. He would have no way of knowing if he was at rest in a gravitational field or accelerating in empty space. For the person inside, gravity and acceleration are indistinguishable. This was the clue. Einstein realized that gravity is not a force. It is a consequence of mass bending the very fabric of the universe. He proposed that space and time are not separate things, but are woven together into a single, four-dimensional fabric, space-time. Here's the most famous analogy for his general theory of relativity. Imagine space-time is a giant, stretched-out trampoline. If you place a heavy bowling ball, like the sun, in the middle of it, the fabric of the trampoline will curve and sag. Now, if you roll a smaller marble, like the Earth, nearby, it won't travel in a straight line. It will follow the curve created by the bowling ball, circling around it as if being pulled. The marble is falling into the dip. According to Einstein, this is gravity. The Earth orbits the sun not because the sun is pulling it, but because it is following the straightest possible path through the curved space-time created by the sun's immense mass. Space-time tells matter how to move. Matter tells space-time how to curve. Even light, which has no mass, must follow these curves. A beam of light passing by a massive star would be bent by its gravity. In 1915, in the midst of World War I, he finalized his equations for general relativity. It was a beautiful, elegant theory, a masterpiece of human thought. But was it true? The theory made a bold, testable prediction. If light from a distant star passed very close to the sun, its path should be bent by the sun's gravity. The position of the star in the sky would appear to shift slightly. The only way to see this would be during a total solar eclipse, when the sun's own brilliant light is blocked by the moon, allowing stars near it to become visible. His personal life during this period was in turmoil. His marriage to Maliva had fallen apart. The intellectual passion they once shared had faded, replaced by distance and sadness. They divorced, and he soon married his cousin, Elsa Lowenthal, who was a caring and motherly figure that looked after him. He was now a leading professor at the Prussian Academy of Sciences in Berlin, the heart of German science, but he was isolated by the intense nationalism of the war. As a pacifist, he was horrified by the patriotic fervor of his scientific colleagues who were busy developing chemical weapons. Then, in 1919, after the war ended, his theory faced its great test. A British astronomer, Sir Arthur Eddington, led 2 expeditions, one to Brazil and one to an island off the coast of Africa, to photograph the stars around the sun during a total solar eclipse. The world waited. When the photographic plates were developed and measured, the results were clear. The starlight had bent, and the amount of bending was exactly what Einstein's theory had predicted. The news was announced at a dramatic meeting of the Royal Society in London. The headline in the London Times read, "Revolution in Science. New theory of the universe. Newtonian ideas overthrown." Overnight, Albert Einstein became the most famous scientist in the world. His face, with its halo of wild hair and deep, thoughtful eyes, was everywhere. He was no longer just a professor. He was a global icon, a symbol of pure genius. He traveled the world, mobbed by crowds wherever he went. People who didn't understand a single equation of his theory still understood that he had touched the very secrets of the cosmos. In 1921, he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics. Curiously, the prize was given for his 1905 paper on the photoelectric effect, not for relativity. The theory of relativity was still considered too controversial, too strange by some on the committee, but it didn't matter. To the public, he was the man who had redefined space and time. As his fame grew, so did the darkness in his home country. The rise of a Nazi party in Germany was terrifying for Einstein. He was not only a pacifist and an internationalist, but he was also Jewish. The Nazis and their sympathizers attacked him and his work, calling relativity Jewish physics and a corrupting influence. They held rallies to denounce him. Einstein, who had once renounced his German citizenship out of principle, was now forced to confront the fact that his country no longer wanted him. The choice was made for him. In 1933, while he and Elsa were visiting the United States, Adolf Hitler came to power. Einstein knew he could never go back. The Nazis ransacked his home in Berlin and put a bounty on his head. He publicly declared that he would not return to a country where there is no freedom of speech, freedom of teaching, and freedom of the press. He accepted a position at the newly formed Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey. He would spend the rest of his life there, a gentle, quirky, and beloved figure in the quiet university town. The man who saw himself as a citizen of the world had finally found his last refuge. In Princeton, he became something of a local legend. He would walk to his office in comfortable clothes, often without socks, his white hair a familiar sight. Children would sometimes ask him for help with their math homework, and he would happily oblige. He was a saint of science, but he remained humble, kind, and deeply engaged with the world. He used his fame to speak out for civil rights, to help fellow refugees fleeing Europe, and to advocate for peace. But his pacifism was about to face its most severe and painful test. In the late 1930s, physicists discovered that splitting the nucleus of a uranium atom, a process called nuclear fission, released an enormous amount of energy. The science was based on the principles Einstein himself had uncovered. Scientists, many of them refugees from fascist Europe, became deeply afraid that Nazi Germany might be developing an atomic bomb based on this discovery. If Hitler got such a weapon, the world would be lost. In 1939, two fellow physicists, Leo Szilard and Eugene Wigner, visited Einstein at his summer home on Long Island. They explained the danger to him. They needed to warn the U.S. government, and they believed that only a letter from someone as famous as Einstein would be taken seriously by the president. This was a profound and terrible moment of inner conflict for Einstein. The lifelong pacifist, the man who hated war and militarism, was being asked to recommend the development of the most destructive weapon ever conceived. The choice was agonizing, but the fear of what the Nazis might do was greater. With a heavy heart, he made his decision. He signed a letter to President Franklin D. Roosevelt, warning him of the German threat and urging the U.S. to begin its own nuclear research program. That letter helped to set in motion the Manhattan Project, the secret U.S. effort that ultimately built the atomic bombs. Einstein himself was not involved. His pacifist views made him a security risk in the eyes of the government. He was a catalyst, but a distant one. In 1945, when he heard the news that an atomic bomb had been dropped on the Japanese city of Hiroshima, he was horrified. The power he had unlocked in a simple equation had been turned into a weapon of unimaginable death and suffering. He later said, "I have made one great mistake in my life. When I signed the letter to President Roosevelt recommending that atom bombs be made, but there was some justification, the danger that the Germans would make them. The weight of that decision would stay with him for the rest of his days." He spent his later years tirelessly campaigning for nuclear disarmament and world government, believing that humanity's new, terrible power required a new way of thinking to prevent self-destruction. The unleashed power of the atom has changed everything save our modes of thinking, he warned, and we thus drift toward unparalleled catastrophe. Scientifically, his final decades were spent on a lonely and ultimately unsuccessful quest. He tried to find a unified field theory, a single set of equations that could describe all the fundamental forces of nature, gravity and electromagnetism, as different aspects of one single thing. He was trying to read the final, deepest thoughts of God. "I want to know how God created this world," he said. "I want to know his thoughts. The rest are details." But the world of physics had moved on. The new generation was exploring the bizarre and probabilistic world of quantum mechanics, a theory Einstein had helped to create but could never fully accept. Its reliance on chance and uncertainty bothered his sense of a logical, orderly universe. God, he famously declared, does not play dice. He searched for his unified theory until the very end, an old line of physics pursuing one last great hunt. In April 1955, at the age of 76, he suffered a burst blood vessel. He was taken to the hospital in Princeton, but he refused surgery. "I want to go when I want," he said calmly. "It is tasteless to prolong life artificially. I have done my share. It is time to go. I will do it elegantly." He died in his sleep. Before his death, he had requested that his body be cremated and his ashes scattered in a secret location to prevent his grave from becoming a site of hero worship. He did not want to be a monument. He wanted to be an idea. The story of Albert Einstein is more than the story of a great scientist. It is the story of a mind that never lost its childlike sense of wonder, a mind that could see a grand cosmic drama in the flick of a compass needle. It is the story of a rebel who challenged authority and reshaped our understanding of reality itself, from the smallest particles of light to the grand architecture of the cosmos. He showed us that the universe is stranger, more beautiful, and more mysterious than we had ever imagined. And he taught us that the most powerful force in that universe is not gravity or atomic energy, but the persistent, courageous, and compassionate curiosity of a human mind. His journey began by imagining what it would be like to ride a beam of light, and in the end, he took all of us with him on that ride.